Hello everyone! Today I'm filming a video with Alex. We have filmed a video before about autism and your dog was also in it.
Yeah.
That was very good. Beans! So this time we are back and we're going to be answering some questions about autism, OCD and general mental health stuff. Beans!
Yeah. Buddy is not with us today, or he might bark at the door maybe to come in. So we have like a list of questions and I have answered them. So yes.
Beans.
The first one is, what conditions do you have?
Everything.
So I'm officially diagnosed with autism and like anxiety and mixed depression, but I don't think that's like an official thing anymore.
Beans.
And OCD tendencies. Romy has said that she thinks I meet the criteria for Tourette's because
Beans.
Isn't it like a vocal tic and some motor tics for over a year or something?
Yeah, one vocal tic, beans, and 2 or more motor tics for over a year, onset before the age of 18, and that can't be explained by another condition or medication. Beans.
Yes, good definition.
Beans.
Yeah, so I suppose I meet the criteria for that, but I haven't like looked into diagnosis or anything about that. So
okay, I have nothing wrong with me. I'm really fat. That's not the answer. I have PANDAS, and the PANDAS causes OCD and tics that are like Tourette's and a bunch of other stuff. And then I'm also autistic.
Yay, neurodivergent. Okay, the next question is, what's your biggest OCD /
Your stomach's massive, sorry.
/ anxiety fear?
Beans. Everything.
Well, I'll answer in like 2 parts. So like when I had my OCD episode, my biggest fear was about kind of losing control and hurting people. And that I was like a bad person.
Your nose is small. Sorry.
So yeah, that would be my main OCD fear. But luckily for me, therapy helped with kind of being able to rationalize that and work through it, sort of thing. And so previously with my anxiety, it was mainly about like social situations. So I had a lot of social anxiety, and I think that was because, you know, with autism you kind of realize that you don't actually know how to be the right way socially.
You have breasticles.
So that made me very anxious about talking to people. But again, with therapy I've managed to, and I think life experience in general, just like getting used to better at masking really, because now I'm more prepared about conversations and just small talk in general, so I feel a lot more at ease. So
Beans.
Now I think my anxiety fear focuses more on like relationships, and worrying if they're being genuine and sort of things, which is, I don't know, that's just like a thing my anxiety focuses on at the moment. So I guess that's my biggest anxiety fear at the moment. Yes.
Yeah.
What about you?
Beans. I'm not afraid of beans. That's not the answer. Beans. Well, when I was 17, and I had an infection which triggered off a lot of OCD stuff again. It was mainly surrounding spirituality and the fear of not being a loving person, and beans. Also the general fear of causing bad things happening, because I had intrusive thoughts and I was worried that they'd cause bad things to happen just in general. Beans. And then when I was like really young, I had a fear of pregnancy, which I can't, and that lasted a very long time. Beans.
Yeah, you mentioned
You're pregnant. Sorry.
Yeah, you mentioned like was it when you were 5 or 6 or around that age that you were worried about pregnancy? And anxiety is so weird because like logically that's not how babies get made, but like yeah.
The thing is, it was it was kind of like, obviously it wasn't funny, but it was kind of funny because obviously I don't know how kids were made, and that increased the uncertainty, so increased my anxiety. And then I remember when I was really young, I said to my dad that I was afraid I'd get pregnant, even though I was like really young. And he was like, no, God decides who gets pregnant. But that made me even more uncertain because I was like, well, what if he decides that I get it?
What if he decides that I get pregnant?
College.
That's like kind of cute, but also like worrying. But hey,
beans.
Yes. Okay.
Sandwiches are very tasty, by the way.
True.
Cartilage.
Okay. So the next question is like what's something you would want everyone to know about mental illness?
That I'm insane, by the way. Not that.
I suppose like that it's more of an everyday effort to not relapse into bad thought processes than just go to therapy and get fixed sort of thing. So it's like,
you have eyes, oh my lord, where'd you get those? That's very
you have to like integrate it into your daily life or just kind of your whole life process.
You have a nose.
I don't know if that makes sense, and it sounds really hard, and it is basically. So with mental illness, it's a way of learning how to reprogram your thoughts to think healthily and like use healthy coping mechanisms instead of a quick fix. And sometimes it's going to be like really hard and you're going to relapse into your bad behaviors, but it's okay. So yes, that's what I would want people to know about mental illness.
Beans. There are a few points I was going to make.
Did you lose them in your brain?
Kind of. But I know one of them was that mental illness isn't always caused by trauma. I've been speaking a lot about this on my Instagram. I don't shut up about it because I focus a lot on the physical aspect because mine's mainly triggered by infections and brain inflammation. So that led me to go down a rabbit hole of researching lots of physical aspects of mental illness. And I think a lot of people do assume that it's usually associated with trauma, but it's not always in the mind. Like, it can be triggered by trauma, but it's not like that for everyone. So I think it's important to just know that, because a lot of people say they feel invalid because they haven't had any trauma, so they don't know why they have a mental illness, but it can be physical, the physical root of it. Beans, like food sensitivities, infections, beans, mold toxicity, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, beans, not beans, hormonal imbalances. There's a bunch of different things, so it's different for everyone, but I think the physical root does need to be looked into further because I ranted about this on my Instagram story, but I think that there's often a one-size-fits-all sort of approach. They're like, well, just take some medications and therapy and you'll get better, but it's not that simple for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely.
Beans.
I think it's very important, like, well, with things like, well, because they always say things like diet and exercise stuff, but, like, it's just kind of to help balance out everything in your body, because I definitely know that my mental health is affected worse if I don't look after myself. I haven't gone down the rabbit hole of research like Romy, but
I'm a nerd.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that physical roots of the problem. Like, it could be because of physical things more so than just something bad happened to you when you was a kid or whatever. Yeah.
Beans, because obviously with PANDAS, it's infection triggers brain inflammation, which triggers OCD and low mood and stuff, but also because I recently found out I have a vitamin D deficiency. I was like, oh, that's why I'm so grumpy.
Yeah.
Beans, because apparently that can also contribute to like low mood and irritability. So beans, I mean, I think that's a factor as well.
Yeah, I think nowadays quite a few people are deficient, and it would always help to get a blood test to check for that, and
Definitely.
because it's common, but
It's
can
very common.
definitely have a big impact on like your mood and just life in general, to be honest. Yeah. Okay.
Beans.
So the next
You
one
have a nose. Oh my goodness! How did you get that?
is
Did you stick it on? Why do I think that's such a weird question?
stick on. Oh, like how was I diagnosed with autism? So
By an annoying doctor. So.
I mean,
Cool.
I like had to bring it up to my therapist myself. Like it wasn't you've ever mentioned to me, but through my own research when I was about 14, I was like, hey, this sounds a lot like me and I relate to it a lot. So I brought it up to the therapist I was seeing, and she was like, yeah, I actually thought that. So I was a bit that's funny.
Cartilage.
Buddy, do you want to be involved? Come on. There we go.
Hello, bud.
Sorry. Hopefully you won't.
Oh, bud.
Come on, you're showing.
Oh,
Hello.
precious.
Sorry for the dog interruption, but
It's all
furry boy, it's all good.
good. Or just don't.
Ooh, I got it. Okay. This way, please. Buddy, come on.
Butt in the screen.
Oh,
But,
there we go. Okay.
But.
Okay. Lie down, buddy. Come on.
He's looking at my
Come.
bag like, what have you got? What have you brought with you? Have you got anything for me? I'm sorry, but I haven't.
Buddy, don't sniff. Just you can stay there, okay? Yep. Just lie down. Yep. Oh. You might just stay there.
That is adorable, Park.
Okay. Yes. So how I was diagnosed. Yeah, I brought up to my therapist when I was 14, and she mentioned that she was buddy. Okay.
It's adorable.
Yeah. She mentioned that she was like, oh yeah, I thought you might be on the spectrum. But yeah, anyway, so we got evidence together through kind of well, there was like an IQ test thingy, and
you
it
smart?
also I am of average intelligence.
Beans.
And it measured like my processing skills and things, and they kind of used that to bring me to the ASD and ADHD team. And then yeah, when I was 16, well, they did a bunch of other things like family history and an interview with an autism specialist. And by 16 I was officially diagnosed. Yay. And how were you diagnosed?
Well, I was having CBT for OCD when I was quite young, and the CBT therapist just said to me, do you have sensory sensitivities? I was like, yes. Do you have difficulty with friendships? Yes. And then from that, they just spoke to my psychiatrist, and I got referred to an autism assessment. Beans. And at that time, I think partly I did suspect I was autistic before that, because I had brought it up myself before that. It's important to do your own research.
Yeah.
But the autism assessment was quite funny because, of course, they went through a lot of things. I had to send in well, I didn't, but my parents had to send in videos of me when I was younger and stuff. My teachers got some sort of surveys, questionnaires to do. They checked my head circumference, my coordination. They looked at my birthmarks to see if I had something called tuberous sclerosis, which I don't have, but they wanted to see my birthmarks just to rule that out, and a bunch of stuff. And then the ADOS test thing, I was being imaginative.
Oh yeah.
And then by the end of it, it was quite funny because apparently it was a multidisciplinary team, so there were like a pediatrician, my psychiatrist, speech and language therapist, and a clinical psychologist. But apparently half of the team thought I was autistic and half thought I wasn't. So it was kind of awkward because we just got a phone call and the doctor was saying, we don't know if Romy's autistic, so we're going to diagnose her anyway. So that's how I got diagnosed. It's quite uncertain because I couldn't really agree.
Yeah. Although I would say that's still definitely a valid diagnosis, because also with the multidisciplinary team, some of the team don't have the expertise around. I can't say for sure, but I feel like when there's so many different people, they only see different parts of the autism or how you present yourself, etc. So like they can't give a full picture of everything. And I suppose that's why they try and add everything into a multidisciplinary team. So you like see the whole picture, but the individual people don't. I don't know. Kind of hard to explain, but yeah, I like that's definitely I think it's still valid even if they're like, well, we're unsure because.
I think it is also because I have PANDAS as well, and they were picking up on those traits as well, and being like, this doesn't quite fit into autism, but I don't know what it is, because I don't think they even knew what PANDAS was. So I think they were picking up on like different things and being like, I don't know what this is.
This is confusing. It's so complicated.
But yeah,
can't fit it into one box.
Yeah, it is a valid diagnosis, and I think self-diagnosis is valid as well. I just want to say that because people often do a lot of research. But yeah, I was formally diagnosed with autism when I was 12, so in my first year of secondary school, which was helpful. Beans.
Yeah, so yeah, because like self-diagnosis definitely, because like for example, you had suspicions kind of before you were officially diagnosed, and I had a few years where I was on the waiting list / trying to get diagnosed, but it's still valid that I felt that I was in the community. I just hadn't got that official diagnosis yet. So I think people should be welcoming to people like, hey, I think I could be this, and then give them information.
Yeah, definitely. Because the people who are self-diagnosed actually often need the most support sometimes because they haven't got the support in place yet.
Yeah, like the professional support that they might need, or the professional recognition, so they might feel quite like dismissed and stuff. So yes. The next question is, do you ever feel like, oh wait, no, is there anything you want to add to that? Just gonna say.
I don't think so.
Okay, cool, good. Do you ever feel like an outcast from the OCD mental health kind of autism community? And I would say I don't think so, because I'm not always really active.
You have a lot of hair, says me with my fluff on my head. Beans.
Thank you. I'm not always I'm not as active as Romy in kind of the community.
I don't shut up. Beans.
But I haven't found to feel like an outcast, because I think a lot of us in those communities tend to be very open and welcoming, because we've all experienced kind of invalidation or just struggles in life. So I've always found that I either like learned something new, or I met with kind of people relating to me and being like, yeah, I understand that, I've gone through that as well. So it's very helpful.
I would say that I have felt like an outcast, but that's just because I went through a phase where I basically felt really guilty for not at that point being able to stop my OCD compulsions. But then I go online to the OCD community and people are saying like, stop your compulsions, stop fueling it, stop seeking reassurance, and then there's me like being really angry at myself for having OCD compulsions. So at that time I felt like a massive outcast, because whilst most people would work on reducing the compulsions, I actually had to just work on accepting myself so I didn't hate myself, and accepting myself with the compulsions first of all. So that's one way in which I was a bit of an outcast, because a lot of people were just focusing on getting rid of the rituals, whereas my first step was actually accept myself with the rituals. Beans and sandwich, I think in the Tourette's community I'm mainly not an outcast, but there was one group where they were saying like PANDAS isn't real, and then I'm like, thanks.
No.
Beans.
Yeah,
Sandwich.
so I think like what you said about the OCD community, what you found with that, or with not being believed about PANDAS, like that's I think that's very toxic and kind of gatekeepy, and also like if people, because
gates.
like with the with the OCD community being like focusing a lot on, you know, get rid of the rituals. That can be really hard with things like pure OCD because
it happens like, almost automatically, I swear.
Because it's like sometimes that gets really like the mental rituals versus intrusive thoughts. It can get very intertwined. So like it's when there's physical compulsions, it's a little bit easier to separate them.
Yeah.
And I feel like mental rituals can be, because it's just in your brain, it's like you don't even have that split second to stop yourself from doing that ritual because it just happens in your brain. So like
beans and
focusing on getting rid of compulsions and also but not accepting yourself and getting frustrated at yourself is not like a healthy way to deal with it.
Yeah, because then you just get low self-esteem as well as OCD.
Yeah, so now it's just like, well, now I feel bad about myself and I have OCD, so thanks.
But yeah, I think an issue for me as well, like what you said with the mental compulsions, it was quite funny because I also have mental tics. So I don't know if it was mental tic or not, but I would have this thing for a while where it wasn't a hallucination, I don't think, but I'd have a little voice in my head that's like, you're a worthless piece of shit, and I'm like, thanks. Or when I ticked, it'd be like, spaz, I'm like, thanks. But the thing is, it would do what I didn't want it to do. Like my tics make me say what I don't want to say. If I tried to not do a mental compulsion, it would just do it for me. Because I didn't want to do it. So it's like, how do you get past that? I don't know. You just sound like a farted.
I don't know if you heard that, but Buddy just groaned and he went on the floor. So
beans, but
yeah,
beans.
I got distracted, but I agree with what you said.
Wait, what's the next question?
Okay, yes, next question. Next one is, has therapy helped? In my
you have a finger. How'd you get that? Sorry.
In my case, therapy has definitely helped me. I think that's because with mental health, I can find it very hard to articulate myself. So therapy has given me a way to kind of have it out in the open and be clear and express myself. And it's given me like the words to use. So nowadays I sound quite
smart.
Like I can articulate myself because I've had a lot of years where like my therapists have been able to explain this is why you're feeling like this, or just make sense of things. So I feel a lot more control in kind of over my anxiety and depression and being able to explain that. And it's very important for me to be able to communicate myself properly. So like therapy has been helpful in that way for me.
That's very good.
How about you?
I haven't been in therapy for a long time, but I had it when I was younger. CBT for OCD with exposure response prevention aspects, and the thing is, it helped in the short term, but it never lasted. Because in the short term I would overcome a ritual, but then I would just relapse again and again and again and again. And I think that's partly because I have PANDAS. If I'd get an infection, it would just come back, and it would feel like, it would almost feel as if it erased my progress. But at the same time, I don't like that mindset because I did have the experience before of knowing how to manage things, so I don't want to say it completely started me from the beginning, but if I had an infection I would just relapse. Beans and also because I had Tourette OCD and not classic OCD back then. I've had both Tourette and classic, but with my Tourette OCD is what mainly disabled me when I was younger. So I had a lot of rituals, but they were preceded by a physical urge rather than intrusive thought. And because of that, when I was doing the ERP, it was actually a bit like tic suppression, and it would cause me rage attacks, because that's just what happens if you suppress it. So, unfortunately for me, I think I'm just a bit atypical. It didn't really work in that sense. But also, as well, when I was 17, I had OCD, but I didn't go to CBT then. I actually felt like it could have made me worse. I didn't want to risk it because I felt like it would lower my self-esteem further from what I said about the guilt for doing rituals. But also because I felt like my OCD was atypical, like, again, at that age, because I somewhat genuinely believed some of the obsessions, I think, because there was, as I said, it was mainly surrounding spirituality, but it's quite funny because there was one time when I had like two streams of thought. Like one was a good one was a bad one. But I, for some reason, had the idea that the bad stream of thought must be some sort of possession, an entity doing it. So I went inside a bush and started praying, and I genuinely believed it. So that's why I wonder, was it all OCD, or was I maybe slightly delusional, but it wasn't picked up back then? I don't know. But it was very weird, and I felt like CBT wouldn't have helped with that for some reason. Beans, because I felt like it was genuine. And also, something I don't necessarily understand about CBT is it constantly tells you to expose yourself to the things you fear. However, sometimes what you fear actually doesn't make better. For example, the law of attraction. I made a video about that. I actually went out on the day we're filming this, but I'm going on a tangent. But the law of attraction was most deep because it's kind of the whole idea of your thoughts create reality. But and I actually found it helpful to distance myself from that rather than expose myself to that, because if I distanced myself from it, then I didn't need to do the compulsions, as I didn't feel like my thoughts could genuinely come true. So I was definitely worried about CBT because of all that, and also because I also had an intrusive, like, CBT would have been an exposure in itself, because I had an intrusive thought of a therapist shouting at me and hating me. So
no.
CBT would have been an exposure in itself, but I'm now better. I don't have any OCD traits, and I didn't have CBT with it because I have sertraline and antibiotics.
Yay.
That was a very fast tangent.
Okay, so I am glad that you found that a bit that medication and antibiotics has helped calm down the OCD thoughts. Okay. So, yes, I think your OCD would be atypical because it's like mixed in with Tourette's as well, so you can't treat it like the typical OCD. And also, I think what you said about believing the obsessions.
You have a bra over there. Sorry.
I know with my OCD, I also genuinely believed that I would, like, it was inevitable that I was going to hurt someone. Like, it's really weird because, like, how would that rationally make sense? Like, why would I, like, it's irrational to think I would go and stab someone, right? But in my brain, I genuinely believed that I was going to, because I was imagining all this, and that must have meant that I wanted to do that, and that I was some crazy person just gonna go like stab someone.
Things.
And so
you have a nose.
Yes. So
Things.
I think believing your obsessions is like definitely part of the OCD.
It's convincing.
Yeah, it's
even
very
though
convincing.
It's very strange.
Like you like, and with your worries about about spirituality and your thoughts affecting something, that's like magical thinking, as in like believing that your thinking will affect the future and stuff. And
I'm pretty sure the law of attraction is just magical thinking.
Yeah. So
things.
It's probably best to stay away from that sort of information or community if it's making your OCD worse, because like that's when it's definitely not healthy to look into that sort of stuff. Yes.
Free OCD fuel.
Basically, yeah. It's magical thinking fuel. Yes. Okay.
Bud's got ears. How the heck did he get those?
Yes. Next question is: would you cure your autism? And
Fanny.
My answer is no, because it's like a big part of my personality, and it affects like how I feel and how I interpret things, and kind of the intensity of my interests, or what I really am interested in. Because like I guess a downside is like I feel like my priorities are very different to other people, so I don't seem interested in what a lot of other people think.
That's not necessarily a downside.
Yeah, like sometimes like it can make you feel out of place. You're like, oh, I literally don't care about that, even though it's like a really big deal to you. Which sounds really rude, but I mean, it's like I just can't make myself care because like other things seem like a higher priority.
Like your penis.
But yeah, so like I wouldn't cure my autism, because then I don't really know who I would be, because
Wow.
it would just change how
You have a nose.
how I like interact with everyone and how I think about things. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing that it's different to a lot of people, because yes.
Sand. I wouldn't cure mine because beans, the special interests aspect, I go down research rabbit holes sometimes, and I think that's a good thing because I learn new things.
Wow.
And sandwich, I had which is quite ironic because I have PANDAS, but I had a special interest in PANDAS and a special interest in Tourette's. That's why I'm just self-obsessed. No, but I went down rabbit holes and researched all these things, and now I can make videos about it. And if I didn't have those special interests, I may not have had that level of focus on that specific topic. So I think it's definitely helped me in terms of raising awareness of things. And I like stimming, which some people found strange, but when I like flap my hands or jump up and down, it makes me very joyous. It releases endorphins, I think. So I think that's a positive because it's like a free emotional regulation
free
tool.
happy feelings, free happy hormones just being like yay.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a gift because I feel like most people, if they jump up and down and flap their hands, they wouldn't get that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think because with like stimming, it's kind of sensory regulation or something, whereas people who aren't neurodivergent, so neurotypicals, like, since they don't need to regulate their senses because their brain is wired differently, they don't have the need or that feeling, so they don't get the happy chemicals from doing so. So like I think it's quite cool that we have something that we can do that makes us feel happy. Like for me, I know listening to a certain music when like with good quality headphones, and just that is like really makes me very happy, and it's like
that's good. That's very good.
So it's fun.
I think me being autistic, I'm kind of glad because, no offense to people who aren't autistic, but I find it quite boring to have a normal life. Like, I don't know, I like being unique, so I think it would be kind of boring for me if I did things the same way as everyone else, I guess. So yeah, I wouldn't actually change it. And people were saying to me yesterday, I was having a conversation about this, they were saying, but you haven't really got anything positive from your autism. But I actually think I have, as I was saying, so I don't actually think it's a bad thing.
I think because you do have quite a lot of bad experiences from just growing up autistic, like socially wise, I feel like it makes you quite a I don't really want to say strong person, because that's, I don't know, I don't like using strong because anyway, but I found that it's made me quite decisive. Like, basically either you do this or you do this, and there's nothing in between. And I suppose that black and white thinking is part of my autism as well, but I feel like I can spend all my time worrying about the grey area, or I can just do one of the options. So I think having hard experiences means you become more confident in your decision making. I don't know if that makes sense, but yes.
Yeah.
Positive.
Beans. Sandwiches.
Yes. Okay, the next question is, what would you tell your younger self when you were at your worst?
You're gay.
And I think that's kind of a hard question. Because like, I wrote that I would say one day you'll have something to look forward to and things won't feel so overwhelming. But I've also mentioned that, like, I wouldn't have believed that if I told myself when I was younger. Like, I would have just been very bitter and just like, sure, whatever. Like, which sounds
Beans.
depressing, but it is, because you know my younger self was a very
Sandwich.
like my mindset was very negative, and I didn't have the self-awareness to be able to believe that. So like
Beans.
it's hard, because you can say what you would say to your younger self, but it doesn't necessarily mean your younger self would believe it, because they haven't had the experiences you've had yet to learn that, really. So
Sandwich.
yes.
Sandwich. Sandwich. That's how I agree. Sandwich. Yeah. I do agree. And sandwich, it can be very difficult for someone in a very dark place to believe it when you say something positive, because they'll probably just think that you're being wishy-washy or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and they might feel like, oh well, you're in a better place now, so you don't know how I feel at this very moment. And it's like, I do know how you feel. It's just I've learned how to cope with that feeling, sort of thing. Or how to cope with it better. And it's less painful now. But it's very hard to communicate that, because you can't like force someone to just suddenly grow life experience, like 2-3 years of life experience, just boom. So I think it's definitely
a journey.
Yes, it's definitely a journey that people have to do themselves, really, and it can be very frustrating when you want to help someone but they just can't see what you've learned, because they just haven't had those experiences yet that prove to them things can get better, really, which is depressing, but
Beans.
Life. The next.
Oh wait, should I answer that?
Oh yes, answer. Yes. What do you tell yourself?
You're not gay. You're not gay. You're not gay. You're not gay.
At your worst, your younger self.
You will be able to use this experience, and it will be worthwhile. Which again, I don't know if my young self will believe it, but sandwich. I mean, it's true, because I've been able to raise awareness now, and I hope that makes a difference. So I think that it is kind of worthwhile, even though I struggled a lot when I was younger. So I would tell my younger self that, and I would also tell them that this is all part of the journey, and you won't be in this state forever. Beans.
Yes.
Sandwich.
I think that's a good thing to say.
I do think hope is an incredibly important thing, because sandwich, when I was younger, I didn't really think about the future. I think I just assumed that I'd always have severe OCD. But then when I was 17, I was quite lucky, because even though when I was 17 I was dealing with low mood and OCD and a bunch of other stuff, sandwiches are very gay. Not that even though I was dealing with a bunch of other stuff, I believed that it would get better. So I'm quite lucky with that, and that did make it easier to deal with as well. So I think believing it will get better is something that makes it easier to deal with, I think.
Yeah, hope is definitely a good thing, because I mean, so
I'm old.
I guess I'm gonna use the example of the fact that I am like pregnant. That is something that means you need to look after yourself more, because there's someone else kind of relying on you. So you're can't
growing a little human.
Yes.
Things.
Can't be like self-destructive and things. So that's definitely matured me to like make better decisions and stick with those better decisions, because if you make the decision to keep a child, then you need to work on yourself and get better, because now I kind of have more of a hope, more of a reason to stop myself from relapsing into bad behaviours, sort of thing. So that's been a very positive change for me. But obviously, if you're mentally ill, just don't go out and get pregnant and like hope that fixes you, because that's not how it works.
Oh, sandwich.
Yes.
Beans.
Okay. Anyway.
Yes, I'm glad that being pregnant has helped, and it's actually very cute. Beans.
Thank you.
Sandwich.
Okay. The next question.
Sandwich. This is long.
Yeah, it's kind of like, what's the biggest challenge with having autism and OCD and anxiety? So I kind of answered it like separately. So like, for example, my biggest challenge with autism is like feeling kind of alienated and out of place. That's something that has affected my mental health badly in the past, and it also still does that sometimes, like, because it's just very lonely sometimes. Yeah, so that would be the biggest challenge. Then the biggest challenge with anxiety, well, kind of hard to explain, but I feel anxiety very physically, like a physical sense of dread in my stomach and chest, of just cold dread, and that can be very and kind of, sweaty and like on edge, and that can completely change my mood. Like if I was positive during the day and then suddenly my anxiety is triggered and I feel that very physically, it's very all overwhelming, so it would change my whole mood for that. And that's quite hard to deal with, because then you need to take a step back and ground yourself and try and get rid of those physical feelings, but it's very hard to not let that kind of overwhelm you. Yeah, so that's quite challenging. And then, so with my OCD, luckily I don't have symptoms anymore, but I'd say the biggest challenge in my episode was like the fact that I couldn't rationalize my intrusive thoughts. Like, as I said, because I believed them, it's like my OCD was so insistent that I was going to hurt someone, and I couldn't say for certain that I wouldn't, because it's basically, yes, you don't want to stab this person, but you can't say you never will in a million years, because it's definitely a possibility, and because there's that possibility, I couldn't say that my intrusive thoughts wouldn't happen. So that was very hard to change my opinion on that. Like, I think through therapy and CBT, basically I had to learn to be comfortable with that uncertainty in life, basically, that I couldn't control if I did that, and also try and normalize it and be like, well, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a serial killer if you have these thoughts, because in reality a lot of people have these random thoughts, so it's like, it doesn't make you this crazy strange person.
Intrusive thoughts are very common.
Yeah,
Beans,
like, they're very common, and I guess it's just kind of exposing yourself to the anxiety of, it could happen, it might happen, and you've got to be okay with that to function in life, really.
Sandwiches.
But yeah, the uncertainty was the biggest challenge with my OCD.
I have to say, it's kind of sad that to get better from OCD, some people have to accept that something terrible might happen.
Yep.
Sand.
I mean, it sounds quite depressing, I suppose, but like, I feel like everyone is mildly aware that something horrible could happen, but they don't necessarily think about it, and then it becomes a problem when you get obsessed about that bad thing happening, and then it becomes unrealistic when that's the only focus of your brain, sort of thing.
It's even worse when you have magical thinking, though, and think the more you think about it, the more it's going to happen, and
Yeah,
then you can't
then
get
it's
out
like,
that
okay,
cycle.
I don't want to think about it, because otherwise it might happen, and then you're like, it keeps coming back in your brain, and you're like, no,
Beans.
go away.
It's a self-fulfilling cycle. Beans.
Yep, because if you don't want to think about it, you're already thinking about it.
Yeah, sandwich. Beans. That happens. But yes, sandwich. Wait, do I need to answer?
Oh yes. The biggest challenges around autism, OCD, anxiety, sorts.
Ooh.
A loaded question.
With my autism, I actually don't feel like there are many challenges, which sounds weird, but I guess I'm so used to being autistic, but I feel like if I was, I mean, actually no, I do think of a challenge. Social overwhelm. A lot of people will message me a lot and talk to me a lot, and sometimes I just have to turn notifications off because I'm like, this is too overstimulating, because I don't think socially interacting is like the most natural thing to me when it is to a lot of people, so I get overwhelmed with it very easily. Sandwich. So I
Wow.
think that is a challenge because it does make me very overstimulated sometimes, and I feel like people might think I'm rude because I can't really talk to them. I need my own time, but it helps if people just know that I'm not being rude and I'm not purposely being like really antisocial or anything. And then the OCD, I mean, OCD is a challenge in itself. It's all a big challenge.
It's a very big challenge.
But I would say one of the biggest challenges was feeling kind of misunderstood because mine was atypical, and I felt like an outcast from the community. So yeah, I think that was probably my personal biggest challenge with it. Beans.
Yes, with autism and like social battery and things, because yes, there's in-person socialization which can be very draining, but also online socialization when there's like a big wall of text or a lot of text to kind of process and answer.
Like,
then you're like, oh, my brain's not working. How do I make words?
Sand.
How do I put words together to answer this question?
Sand.
Sort of thing. Yes.
But yes. But is that all?
Yes, that's the end of the questions. Yay.
That's good.
Long video.
It's been really lovely filming with you, Beans, and I hope that people watching enjoyed this video and maybe it can help someone. But yes.
Yes, thanks for watching. It's been nice to be on the channel, and
Beans.
Hopefully Buddy was very cute in the video.
He's always cute.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Thank you so much for watching. Bye, you fat cunts. No,
bye.
bye.